Welcome back to the sanctuary, my loves. You have arrived just in time for a story that is going to freeze your blood and then melt it completely. Before we enter the Phantom King's castle, do me a favor. Press that like button if you believe a forbidden touch is worth the risk. It helps our stories find their way to other listeners in the dark. If you are new here, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We have so many more secrets to tell, and you do not want to be left behind when the next chapter drops. And please, share this with a friend who needs a new alpha obsession. Finally, I am calling out to my pack. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Are you tucked in bed, working the night shift, or escaping a rainy day? Let me know your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing how far our kingdom reaches. Now, take a deep breath. The king is waiting.
I was sold to the Phantom King with a single terrifying instruction: never touch his skin. They said the cursed scar on his chest was a void that would burn the flesh from my bones. I was sent there to change his bandages and watch him die. But the night the fever took him, I broke the rule. I placed my bare hands directly on the monster's heart to save him. I expected to die. Instead, the king woke up. The agony in his eyes was gone, replaced by a dark, starving hunger. He pinned me to the mattress, inhaled my scent, and whispered the threat that would seal my fate. "You stopped the pain, witch. But if you touch me like that again, I won't stop."
Chapter 1. The Tribute. The carriage didn't have windows. It was a black iron box on wheels, designed to keep the cold out, or perhaps to keep the prisoner in. The air inside was stale, smelling of rust and fear, a scent Kira Wren knew intimately. Kira sat in the dark, her hands folded tightly in her lap to stop them from shaking. She was a Hedge Witch, a wolf with weak shifting abilities, but a knack for potion making and minor healing. In the hierarchy of the wolf kingdoms, she was less than dirt. She was a resource to be traded, a pawn to be sacrificed on the chessboard of alpha politics. And today, she had been sold. Her alpha, a greedy man who had gambled away the pack's winter stores on bad whiskey and worse card games, had traded her to the Kingdom of Umbra to settle a debt. "He needs a nurse," her alpha had sneered as the iron guards shackled her wrists, the cold metal biting into her skin. "The Phantom King burns through healers like kindling. Try not to die in the first week, Kira. It would be bad for business." The carriage jolted to a halt with a bone-rattling thud. The heavy iron door groaned open, letting in a blast of air so cold it felt like a knife slicing against her skin. Kira stepped out, her breath misting in the freezing air. She stood at the base of Black Hollow Keep. It wasn't a castle. It was a mountain of obsidian carved into a weapon. Spires of black stone pierced the gray, swollen sky, and the air smelled of ozone, ancient magic, and old, dried blood. It was a place where hope came to die. "Move," a guard in faceless black armor commanded, shoving her forward with the butt of his spear. Kira stumbled, but caught herself before she hit the frozen ground. She didn't cower. She had spent her life being overlooked and undervalued. She had learned that dignity was the only thing they couldn't take from her unless she gave it to them. She pulled her thin gray cloak tighter around her shoulders and walked toward the massive gates. "Charming," she muttered under her breath, eyeing the gargoyles leering down from the battlements. Nothing says home sweet home like a fortress designed to impale passing birds. The courtyard was silent. No servants bustled, no soldiers trained. It was a tomb. They marched her through the main doors into a great hall that was swallowed by shadows. The windows were draped in heavy black velvet, blocking out the weak sun winter. The only light came from a few dying embers in a fireplace large enough to roast a horse. "Wait here," the guard grunted, his voice echoing in the vast emptiness. Kira stood alone. In the dark, she could feel it, the oppressive weight of the air here. It wasn't just gloom, it was a curse. The very stones of the castle were vibrating with a low, constant thrum of pain. It was a frequency she recognized. As a healer, she knew the sound of a wound that wouldn't close. But this wasn't a broken bone. This felt like the castle itself was bleeding out. A door creaked open at the far end of the hall. It wasn't the priestess. A shadow detached itself from the throne at the top of the dais. Kira stopped breathing. She hadn't realized someone was sitting there. The figure had been so still, so integrated into the darkness, that he seemed part of the architecture. The figure stood. He was massive, easily 7 feet tall, broad-shouldered, and draped in a cloak of midnight fur that seemed to smoke in the dim light. He wore a mask made of smooth, silver metal that covered the entire right side of his face, reflecting the dying firelight. King Kaelum Vossen, the Phantom, the monster who ruled from the dark. He didn't speak. He descended the stairs, his movements silent and predatory, like a wolf stalking prey in deep snow. He stopped 10 feet away, the air temperature dropping until Kira could see the frost forming on the stone floor. He looked at her with the one eye visible, an eye the color of a frozen ocean, cold and dead. "You are small," he rasped. His voice was a ruined thing, like wind howling through a cavern. "You will break easily."
Chapter 2. The Rules of the Beast. Kira locked her knees to keep from falling. The aura rolling off him was terrifying, a suffocating mix of alpha dominance and raw magical decay that tasted like ash on her tongue. "I am stronger than I look, Your Majesty," she whispered, forcing her voice to remain steady. "And you look like you haven't slept in a decade, so I think I can take you in a fair fight." Kaelum tilted his head. The silver mask caught the dying firelight, creating a distorted reflection of her own fearful face. He ignored her sarcasm, though his single visible eye narrowed slightly, assessing her. "They all say that," he murmured, his tone devoid of hope. "The last one lasted 3 days before the madness took him. The one before that threw herself from the battlements rather than endure another night." He took a step closer. The smell of him hit her. Rain, pine, and underneath it, the sickly sweet scent of rotting magic. It was coming from beneath the mask. It was the smell of a festering wound. "Do you know why you are here, witch?" "To heal you," Kira said, lifting her chin. Kaelum laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound, like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "No. You are here to clean up the mess. The curse cannot be healed. Your duty is to change the dressings, administer the numbing draughts, and ensure I do not bleed onto the carpets. You are a janitor for my pain." He turned his back on her, dismissing her as if she were a piece of furniture he had decided he didn't like. "High Priestess Ivara will show you your quarters. Do not wander, do not speak to me unless spoken to, and above all—" He stopped, looking over his shoulder. His single blue eye burned with a sudden terrifying intensity that pinned her in place. "Do not touch me." I have to touch you to change the bandages, sire," she pointed out, her healer's logic overriding her fear. "Unless you expect me to perform telekinesis, which is unfortunately not in my skill set." "Gloves," Kaelum snarled, the temperature in the room plummeting further. "You will wear iron weave gloves. If your bare skin touches mine, the curse will try to jump. It will eat your flesh to feed itself, and I do not like the taste of burnt witch." The massive doors creaked open, and a tall, severe woman in flowing red robes swept in. High Priestess Ivara. She looked at Kaelum with a mix of fear and reverence, and at Kira with pure, unadulterated disdain. "I will take her, my king," she said smoothly, her voice dripping with false subservience. Kaelum didn't respond. He melted back into the shadows of his throne, becoming one with the dark once more. Kira followed the priestess, but she felt a strange pull in her chest, a healer's instinct. The king wasn't just scary, he was in agony, the kind of agony that drove men insane. And for some reason, the thought of him sitting alone in the dark with that pain made her heart ache more than her fear. She glanced back once, but the throne was swallowed by shadow.
Chapter 3. The Chamber of Ice. Kira's room was a small, windowless cell in the servants' wing, smelling of mildew and neglect, but she spent little time there. Her life now revolved around the king's private chambers, the Chamber of Ice. It was aptly named. The king kept his room at sub-zero temperatures because the cold numbed the burning of the scar. Frost coated the windows in intricate patterns, and Kira's breath misted in the air constantly. Every evening at sunset, Kira entered the room with a tray of fresh linens, salves, and heavy iron-weave gloves that chafed for skin. For the first 3 nights, it was a silent, terrifying ritual. Kaelum would sit in a heavy wooden chair by the frosted window, shirtless, staring out into the eternal gray of his kingdom. The first time Kira saw him without his shirt, she almost dropped the tray. His body was a masterpiece of warrior strength, corded muscle, broad chest, abs defined like stone. He was built for war. But the beauty was ruined by the horror on his right side. The scar started at his jaw, disappeared under the silver mask, and reappeared at his collarbone, slashing jaggedly down his chest to his hip like a lightning strike. It wasn't white or pink like a normal scar. It was black, and it moved. The edges of the wound smoked, pulsating with a dark, violent energy that looked like it was actively trying to digest him from the inside out. "Staring is rude," Kaelum growled on the 3rd night, not opening his eyes. His voice was rougher than usual. "I am assessing the tissue, sire," I lied, pulling on the heavy, scratchy gloves. "Just checking if you're rotting ahead of schedule." "There is no tissue, only void." Kira approached him. The cold radiating from his skin was intense enough to make her eyes water. She began to peel away the old bandages. The smell of ozone and rot filled the air, making her stomach turn. He didn't flinch, but his muscles jumped under her gloved hands. Every touch was clearly agony for him. "You are tense," Kira murmured, working quickly to apply the salve. "I am dying slowly, witch. It tends to make one tense." "My name is Kira," she said firmly. Pausing in her work, Kaelum opened his eye. He looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time. "Kira." He tested the name. It sounded harsh in his gravelly voice. "It means dark in the old tongue." "It means beam of light in mine," she corrected with a smirk. "Take your pick. I prefer the latter, mostly because it annoys people." "Fittingly annoying," he grunted, closing his eye again. "Now finish your work and leave. Your heartbeat is loud. It annoys me." Kira finished wrapping his chest. She tied the knot efficiently. "Sire," she hesitated, looking at the red marks the iron gloves left on his healthy skin. "The gloves. They are rough. They irritate the healthy skin around the wound. If I used silk—" "No," he snapped, his eyes flashing open. "The curse burns through silk in seconds. Iron is the only thing that holds it back. Go." Kira left, but as she closed the heavy door, she heard a sound that haunted her. A low, suppressed groan of pain. The king didn't sleep. He just endured. And Kira realized with a sinking feeling that she wasn't just afraid of him anymore. She was starting to pity the monster in the dark. Chapter 4. The Fever Dream. A week later, the routine broke. Kira arrived at the door at sunset, tray in hand, but there was no answer to her knock. She pushed it open. The room was sweltering. The magical cooling wards had failed. The fire in the grate was roaring, fed by a frantic magical energy that seemed to pulse in time with a heartbeat. "Sire," Kira called out, rushing in. Kaelum was on the bed, thrashing. He had ripped the bandages off.
The black scar was glowing a violent, angry purple, the tendrils of darkness spreading across his chest like poison in veins. He was growling, a feral, wet sound that raised the hair on her arms. "Get out!" he roared when he saw her, his voice slurring. "The hunger! It's awake!" Kira didn't leave. She dropped the tray with a clatter and ran to the bed. "You're burning up. You're going to cook yourself alive." "I said get out!" He tried to push himself up, but collapsed back onto the pillows, sweat slicking his skin. "I can't control it." The curse was feeding. It was consuming his life force rapidly. If the fever didn't break, he would be dead by dawn. Kira grabbed the bucket of ice water she always brought. She soaked a cloth and tried to dab his forehead. He snarled, his hand lashing out, grabbing her wrist. His grip was crushing. The heat of his skin burned through her sleeve. "Run!" he wheezed, his single eye wide with panic. "Run, Kira! Don't let it touch you!" It was the first time he had used her name with concern, not contempt. Kira looked at the scar. It was pulsing in time with his erratic heart. The iron-weave gloves were across the room, on the tray. She couldn't reach them. She needed to apply a cooling rune, but she needed skin contact to anchor it. She looked at the gloves. Too far. She looked at the king. He was convulsing, his back arching off the mattress. "Forgive me," she whispered. Kira didn't run. She climbed onto the bed, straddling his waist to pin him down. She placed her bare hands directly onto his chest, right over his heart, inches from the black void of the scar.
Chapter 5. The Inciting Touch. "No!" Kaelum screamed, trying to buck her off. "It will kill you!" Kira ignored him. She pressed her palms flat against his burning skin. She didn't use the simple cooling spell. She reached into her own core, into the hedge magic that everyone said was weak and useless, and she pulled. She didn't try to fight the void. She offered it an alternative. "Take this," she thought, projecting a wave of pure, cool calm into his body. "Feed on this instead." The reaction was instantaneous. The violet light of the scar flared blindingly bright, then receded. The black tendrils stopped spreading. They curled back, retreating from her hands as if her touch was holy water. The heat in Kaelum's body snapped. The favor broke in a single violent shudder that rattled the bed frame. Kaelum gasped, his back arching off the mattress. His eye rolled back, then snapped forward, locking on to hers. The pain was gone. For the first time in 10 years, the agonizing screaming fire in his nerves was silent. Her hands felt like ice, like water, like salvation. He lay there, panting, staring up at the small woman pinning him to the bed. Her hair had come loose, falling around them like a curtain of dark silk. Her hands were still on his chest, soft and cool. He should push her away. He should check her hands for burns, but he couldn't. The relief was a drug. And underneath the relief, something else woke up. Something darker, hungrier, and far more dangerous than the curse. His beast. It roared in his head. Mine. Kaelum's hand moved. He didn't strike her. His large hand wrapped around the back of her neck, his thumb pressing into her pulse point. He pulled her down until her nose brushed his. Kira froze, her heart hammering against his chest. "You stopped it," Kaelum whispered, his voice sounding wrecked. "The pain. It stopped." I transferred the heat," Kira stammered, realizing how intimate their position was. "I should go. I touched you. It is forbidden. You threatened to feed me to the void." She tried to pull back. Kaelum's grip tightened. He didn't let her go. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. The blue of his iris darkened, swirling with a storm of obsession. "You touched me," he growled, the vibration running straight through her. "You touched the monster, and you didn't burn." He leaned up, his lips brushing her ear, his voice dropping to a lethal, promising whisper. "You stopped the pain, Kira.
But if you touch me like that again, I won't stop.
Chapter 6. The Addiction. The silence in the room was heavier than the stone walls surrounding them. Kira lay frozen on the bed, trapped beneath the massive weight of the king. His threat hung in the air. "I won't stop," vibrating against her skin like a physical hum. It wasn't a threat of violence. It was a threat of consumption. Slowly, agonizingly, Kaelum pulled back. He didn't move far. He sat back on his heels, straddling her hips, his single blue eye scanning her face with a terrifying intensity. He grabbed her hands, turning them over palms up, inspecting the skin where she had touched the void. "You are unmarred," he whispered, tracing her lifeline with a calloused thumb. His touch was reverent, like a man handling a holy relic. Kira trembled, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "I told you I didn't burn, though, for the record, you are extremely heavy." Kaelum ignored the jab. "You should have," he growled, his voice tight. "The void eats everything. Iron, stone, flesh. I have seen it turn armor to dust. Why did it not eat you?" "Maybe it was full," Kira said, her voice shaking, but her sarcasm slipping through as a defense mechanism. "Or maybe it just has good taste and realized I'm too bitter to digest." Kaelum looked at her hands, then down at his own chest. The scar was dormant. It was still black, still an ugly rift in his flesh, but the angry violet pulsing had stopped. The fever was gone. For the first time in a decade, his mind was clear of the red haze of agony. It was the most intoxicating feeling he had ever known. It was better than wine, better than blood, better than power. And she was the source. He looked at her, small, disheveled, smelling of cheap soap and fear, and felt a sudden and violent possessiveness that had nothing to do with healing. He climbed off the bed, his movements fluid and powerful now that the pain wasn't crippling him. He walked to the massive wardrobe carved from obsidian and pulled out a heavy velvet robe. He threw it at her. "Cover yourself," he commanded, his back to her, "and gather your things." Kira scrambled up, pulling the robe tight. It smelled of him, cedar and storm. "Am I being dismissed? Because if so, I'd like a carriage with actual windows this time." Kaelum turned. The silver mask gleamed in the firelight, hiding the dormant scar. "Dismissed?" He laughed, a dark, low sound that rumbled in his chest. "No, Kira, you are being relocated. You are no longer a servant. You are a medical necessity." He walked to the heavy door and threw it open with enough force to crack the wood. "Guards," he bellowed, "move the witch's belongings to the obsidian suite, immediately." Kira gasped. She knew the layout of the keep from the whispers in the servants' quarters. The obsidian suite was the room directly adjoining the king's. It was reserved for queens and visiting royalty. "Sire, you can't," she whispered, stepping off the bed. "The court, the priestess, they will riot." "I am the king," Kaelum snarled, walking back to her. He loomed over her, blocking out the light from the fire. "I do not answer to the court. I answer to the pain. And you—" He reached out, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her neck, dangerously close to her pulse. "You are the only thing that stands between me and the madness. You are mine now." Chapter 7. The Gilded Cage. The obsidian suite was beautiful. It was also, undeniably, a prison. Kira stood in the center of the room, turning in a slow circle. The floors were black marble so polished she could see her reflection. The bed was draped in silver silk that cost more than her entire village. A fire crackled merrily in the grate, chasing away the eternal chill of the keep. But the door had a heavy iron lock, and she could hear the rhythmic clanking of armored guards posted outside. She wasn't a guest. She was a stash. The king had realized she was his drug, and he had locked her in his medicine cabinet. At least the thread count is higher, she muttered to herself, flopping onto the bed. Even if my freedom count is 0. A knock came at the connecting door, the heavy oak barrier that led directly into Kaelum's bedroom. Enter, she whispered, sitting up. Kaelum walked in. He was fully dressed now, in his black armor, the high collar hiding the scar and the silver mask back in place. He looked like the monster the world feared, a towering figure of shadow and violence. But Kira noticed something else. His shoulders were relaxed. His gait was smooth, not hitched with hidden pain. Dinner, he stated. 2 servants followed him in carrying silver trays laden with roasted meats, exotic fruits, and wine. They set the table in silence, eyes averted, terrified of looking at the king or his guest. They scurried out like frightened mice. Sit, Kaelum commanded, pointing to the chair opposite him. Kira sat. She folded her arms and stared at the food. I'm not hungry. I lose my appetite when I'm kidnapped. You were not kidnapped, Kaelum said, pouring himself wine. You were promoted. To what? Prisoner? To protected asset. Why am I here, Kaelum? She used his name boldly. He saw his eye twitch, but he didn't correct her. If I am just a healer, the infirmary would suffice, or the servants' quarters. Kaelum dismissed the remaining servant with a sharp wave of his hand. When the door clicked shut, he leaned forward, the firelight dancing on his mask. He said, The infirmary is for soldiers. You are not a soldier. You are a target. A target. Do you think the high priestess wants me healed? Ivara thrives on my weakness. If I am broken, the church rules through me. If I am whole, I am a threat to her power. He picked up a goblet of wine, the metal crushing slightly in his grip as he thought about his enemies. If they find out you can stop the curse, Kira, they will not give you a medal. They will cut your throat, or worse, they will cut off your hands, so you can never touch me again. Kira went cold. She instinctively curled her fingers into her palms. So I am a prisoner for my own protection? That's a classic tyrant excuse. You are a prisoner because I am selfish, Kaelum corrected, his honesty brutal and disarming. I lived in hell for 10 years. You pulled me out. Do not expect me to let you go back to the servants' quarters where anyone can touch you. He reached across the table. He didn't touch her skin, but he tapped his finger on the back of her hand, right over a knuckle. Eat. You are too thin. If you are to wrestle my demons, you need strength, and I prefer my opponents well-fed. Chapter 8. The Shadow Court. 3 days passed in the gilded cage. Kira saw no one but Kaelum. He came to her every evening. He didn't ask for sex. He didn't even ask for conversation. He would simply sit in the armchair by her fire, strip off his shirt, and wait. Kira would touch the scar. The relief would wash over him. His eye would roll back, and he would fall into a deep, dreamless sleep in her chair while she read books from his private collection. It was intimate. It was domestic. It was terrifyingly peaceful until the summons came. The heavy doors to the hallway banged open, shattering the quiet morning. High Priestess Ivara stood there, flanked by 4 temple guards in red armor. Her face was a mask of cold fury. Kira Ren, Ivara announced, her voice like a cracking whip, you are summoned to the great hall. Kira stood up, dropping her book. She didn't tremble. By whose order? By the order of the council, Ivara smiled thinly. There are rumors, child, rumors of blood magic, of seduction. The king spends his nights in your room, yet he emerges calm, unnatural. We suspect foul play. I am healing him, Kira said, lifting her chin. Something you failed to do for a decade. Ivara's smile vanished. We shall see. She beckoned. Come, or be dragged. I prefer dragged. Kira walked. She held her head high as they marched her through the winding corridors to the throne room. The court was assembled. Dukes, duchesses, and generals. They stared at her with hungry, judging eyes. They were vultures, waiting for a carcass. Kaelum sat on the throne. He was slouching, looking bored, but Kira saw the truth. His hand was gripping the stone armrest so hard that hairline cracks were appearing in the granite. "High Priestess," Kaelum rumbled, as they shoved Kira to the foot of the dais. "You interrupt my mourning. This had better be good." "We interrupt a crime, sire." Pointing a long, manicured finger at Kira, Ivara said, "This witch. She has ensnared you. We smell the hedge magic on her. She is using forbidden binding spells to sedate you, to weaken your mind, so she can rule through you." The court murmured. It was a clever accusation. If he was calm, it was because he was bewitched. "She does not weaken me," Kaelum said, his voice deadly quiet. "She strengthens me." "Then let us test her," Ivara declared, stepping forward. "If she is a true healer, let her heal this." Ivara pulled a dagger from her sleeve. Before anyone could react, she slashed the arm of the guard next to her. A deep, bleeding gash. "Heal him, witch," Ivara commanded. "Show us your power, or admit you are a fraud who uses sex and shadow binding. We all know ancient blood magic is the only way a hedge witch could control a king." Kira stared at the bleeding guard. She could heal him, but hedge magic was slow. It required poultices, herbs, and time. She couldn't do what she did to Kaelum. That was unique. That was a connection of souls, not just magic. If she failed, they would burn her at the stake before sunset. Kaelum stood up. The shadows in the room elongated, stretching toward him. He descended the stairs, step by heavy step. He didn't look at the bleeding guard. He looked out Ivara. "You demand a show?" Kaelum growled. He stopped in front of Kira. He turned his back to the court, shielding her with his massive cape. He whispered to her, his voice rough with need. "Do it. Touch me. Show them what you are." Chapter 9. The Display.
"Here?" Kira whispered, horrified. "In front of them? They'll see the scar."
"They want to see magic?" Kaelum's single visible eye was wild, the pupil blown wide. "I will show them magic." He grabbed her hand and pressed it against his chest, right over his heart, through the layers of his tunic and heavy black armor. It shouldn't have worked through the clothes, but the bond between them had grown in the quiet nights. Kira felt the hum of the scar, the sleeping beast waking up. She didn't hesitate. She pushed her calm into him, a massive surge of hedge magic fueled by her own fear and anger. Kaelum roared. It wasn't a roar of pain. It was a roar of power. As the pain vanished, his true alpha aura, suppressed for years by the agony of the curse, exploded outward. A shock wave of pure, black energy blasted from his body. The stained glass windows shattered, raining colored shards onto the nobility. The torches flared green. Every single person in the room, including the high priestess and her guards, was forced to their knees by the sheer, crushing weight of his dominance. The air became heavy, smelling of ozone and absolute authority. Only Kira remained standing, anchored by his hand on hers. She was the eye of the storm. Kaelum looked down at the cowering priestess, who was struggling to breathe under the pressure of his aura. His eyes were glowing so bright they illuminated the dark hall. "She is not weakening me, Ivara." Kaelum boomed, his voice echoing like thunder rolling off a mountain. "She is the only reason I haven't torn this castle apart stone by stone." He released Kira's hand. He walked to Ivara, who was trembling on the floor. "Touch her again," he promised, leaning down until his mask was inches from her face. "And I will feed you to the void myself. I will make your end so slow that history books will be written about it." He returned to Kira, scooping her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing. He walked out of the silent, terrified hall, carrying her back to the safety of the dark. "You enjoy being dramatic, don't you?" Kira whispered into his chest, her heart racing. "Only when it shuts them up," he grunted. Chapter 10. The Relapse. Back in the suite, the adrenaline crashed. Kaelum paced the room, agitated. The display of power had cost him. The scar was waking up again, angry at being suppressed, demanding a price for the earlier release. "You shouldn't have done that," Kira said, watching him from the doorway. "They fear you now more than ever." "Good," Kaelum snarled, tearing at the buckles of his armor. "Fear keeps you safe. Respect is for soft kings." He stopped, pacing. He leaned against the mantel of the fireplace, gasping. He ripped his mask off, throwing it onto the rug. The scar was glowing violet again. The pain was returning, sharper than before. He gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead. "I need you to leave." "What?" Kira stood up. "I'm not leaving. You're in pain." "The hunger," he wheezed, clutching his chest. "It's back, and it's worse. The relief, it makes the return of the pain unbearable. If you touch me now, I don't think I can let you go." He looked at her, his face twisted in a mixture of agony and desire. "I tried to be noble," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I tried to keep it professional. But looking at you in that hall, holding you while they stared..." He sank to his knees, clutching his chest. "Please, Kira, go to your room, lock the door. If I touch you tonight, I will ruin you." Kira looked at the monster on his knees. She saw the man who had shielded her from the entire world, who had threatened a priestess for her. She didn't leave. She walked to the heavy oak door and turned the lock. Click. She threw the key onto the bed. She walked to him. "I'm not afraid of you, Kaelum." "You should be," he groaned, his eyes squeezing shut. "I am a monster." "You're a drama queen," she corrected softly. Kira knelt in front of him. She didn't ask permission. She placed both hands on his bare cheeks, forcing him to look at her. "Look at me." He opened his eyes. The blue was swallowed by black. "Take it," she whispered. "Take the peace." She kissed him. It wasn't a chaste kiss. It was a transfer of energy. As her lips touched his, she pushed every ounce of her magic into him. Kaelum broke. He groaned, a feral sound, and his arms wrapped around her, crushing her against him. He kissed her back with a starvation that terrified and thrilled her. The pain vanished. The pleasure exploded. "Kira," he growled against her mouth, pulling her down onto the rug with him. "I warned you. I said I wouldn't stop." "Then don't," she breathed, threading her fingers through his hair. And the Phantom King, the monster of the dark, surrendered to the light. Chapter 11. The Morning After. The sun that filtered into the obsidian suite was gray and weak, struggling through the thick glass, but to Kaelum Vossen, it felt like the brightest dawn in a century. He woke up on the rug. His back was against the sofa, his legs sprawled out and curled heavily against his chest. Wrapped in his arms like a precious hoard was Kira. He didn't move. He barely breathed. He was terrified that if he shifted, the reality would shatter like thin ice. For the first time in 10 years, he had slept. Not the passed-out exhaustion of pain management, but actual restorative sleep. The scar on his chest was silent. It wasn't gone. The jagged black rift still marred his skin, but the violet pulsing had stopped. It felt dormant, sated. He looked down at Kira. She was asleep, her cheek pressed against his healthy pectoral muscle, a line of drool threatening his tunic. She looked pale. Panic spiked in his chest, cold and sharp. I drained her, he thought, horror washing over him. I took too much. Kira, he whispered, his voice rough with sleep and fear. She stirred, making a soft, sleepy sound that hit him harder than a warhammer. Her lashes fluttered open. They weren't glassy or dead. They were warm, honey brown, and focused on him, though slightly crossed. "You're loud," she mumbled, stretching. "And hard. Did we sleep on the floor? My back feels like I wrestled a gargoyle." Kaelum let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "You are live." Surprisingly, she sat up, wincing slightly. The stone floor hadn't been kind, even with the rug. She looked at his chest. She reached out, her fingers hovering over the scar. "Does it hurt?" Kaelum grabbed her hand, kissing the palm. "No, it is quiet." He looked at her intensely, searching for signs of damage. "But you are pale. The transfer takes a toll. I felt the drain." "I'm fine," she lied, though her stomach chose that moment to let out a growl loud enough to startle a guard outside. "Okay, I'm starving. I could eat a horse. Ideally cooked, but I'm not picky." Kaelum stood up, lifting her effortlessly with him. He didn't put her down. He carried her to the table like she was made of glass. "Then you will feast, and then you will rest. You are not leaving this room today." "Kaelum, I have duties," she protested, though she wrapped her arms around his neck comfortably. "The herbs in the garden need tending, and I'm pretty sure your laundry staff is terrified of my underwear." "Rot," he finished, placing her in the chair. "Let them rot. You are my only duty now." He rang the bell for servants. His demeanor shifted from lover back to king in a heartbeat, his face hardening as the door opened. But as he turned back to her, watching her devour a roll of bread, Kira saw the truth. The monster was still there, lurking in the shadows of his mind, but for now, the leash was firmly in her hands, and she wasn't letting go. Chapter 12. The Viper's Alternative. While the king played house in his tower, High Priestess Ivara was in the catacombs beneath the castle, pacing a room lit by green corpse candles. The air smelt of sulfur and bad intentions. She was furious. The king's display of power in the throne room had terrified the court, yes, but it had also given them hope. A strong king meant a stable kingdom. Ivara didn't want stability. She wanted control. "He is too strong," Archduke Silas said from the shadows. Kaelum's uncle was a gaunt, sharp-faced man who had ruled as regent before Kaelum came of age. He missed the power like an addict missed a fix. "The witch is fixing him. If the curse breaks, his mind will clear. He will see what we have done to the treasury." "We cannot kill her," Ivara hissed, her robes swirling as she turned. "He has tied his aura to hers. If she dies violently, he will go berserk and level the castle with us inside." "I saw his eyes, Silas. He isn't just possessive, he's obsessed." "Then what?" Silas asked, leaning against a damp wall. "We let them play Beauty and the Beast until he produces an heir?" Ivara stopped pacing. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face, stretching her thin lips. "Kaelum is a creature of duty. He keeps the witch because he needs her magic. But what does a king need more than health?" "An heir and alliances." "Exactly." Ivara smoothed her red robes. "The witch is a hedge wolf. She has no lineage. She cannot give him a strong heir. The council will not accept a mongrel queen. It goes against centuries of tradition." She pulled a scroll from her sleeve, the seal broken. "We do not kill the witch. We replace her. We remind the king of his obligations. We bring in Lady Ilara of the Frost Pack." Silas chuckled, a dry sound. "Ilara? She is beautiful, ambitious, and hates competition. She will eat the little hedge witch alive." "Precisely," Ivara nodded. "We make the witch feel small. We make her feel unworthy. We drive a wedge between them using protocol and politics. And when she tries to leave, then we kill her. If she leaves of her own accord, the bond weakens. Then he will be vulnerable again." Silas pushed off the wall. "I'll send the raven. The Frost Pack has been waiting for an invitation." Ivara blew out a corpse candle. "Let the games begin."
Let's see if his little beam of light can outshine a diamond.
Chapter 13. The Uninvited Guest. The peace in the obsidian suite lasted exactly 2 days. Kira was reading by the fire, Kaelum resting his head on her lap while she braided small sections of his hair, when the horns blew, the signal for a royal arrival. Kaelum stiffened. The peace vanished from his face, replaced by the mask of the king. The scar rippled, sensing his agitation. "Who dares approach unannounced?" he growled, standing up. "I explicitly ordered no interruptions unless the castle was burning down." "Maybe it's a very polite fire?" Kira suggested, tying off the braid. "Stay here. I'll hide the evidence of your relaxation." "Stay here," he commanded Kira, ignoring her joke. "I will handle this." He left. Kira waited. She paced the room, reorganizing the bookshelf, then reorganizing it back. An hour later, a servant appeared. "My lady," the girl squeaked, looking terrified. "The king requests your presence in the dining hall. He says, 'Wear your best.'" Kira's stomach turned. "My best is a wool tunic with fewer holes than the others." But the servant presented a velvet dress Kaelum must have ordered, a deep midnight blue. Kira put it on. She looked in the mirror. She looked like a queen, but she felt like a child playing dress-up. She walked to the dining hall. The doors opened. It wasn't a private dinner. The table was set for 3. Kaelum sat at the head, looking like a thunderstorm trapped in armor. To his left sat a woman who made the room feel brighter and colder at all once. Lady Ilara. She had hair like spun silver, eyes like ice, and she was wearing a gown of white fur and diamonds that cost more than Kira's entire pack history. "Ah!" She turned, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "The nursemaid. We were just discussing you." Kira froze. Kaelum stood up. "Kira, sit." He pointed to the chair at his right, the place of honor. Ilara's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "It is so quaint, Kaelum, that you allowed the help to dine with us. It shows such charity." "She is not help," Kaelum ground out, his voice vibrating the silverware. "She is my guest." "Of course." Ilara sipped her wine. "I am here on behalf of the council, Kaelum, to discuss the merging of our lines. The winter has been hard. A union between Umbra and Frost would save your people." She looked at Kira, scanning her up and down. "But these are matters of state. Perhaps the girl could go fetch the dessert. It seems more suited to her station." Kira's stomach turned. She looked at Kaelum. He was gripping his fork so hard it bent into a U shape. "Ilara," Kaelum said, his voice low, "one more word and I will remove your tongue." "For what?" "For speaking the truth. She is a hedge wolf, Kaelum. She has no status. You are a king. You need a queen, not a hot water bottle." Kira stood up. "I have lost my appetite. And honestly, the company is terrible." "Sit down," Kaelum commanded. "No," Kira said quietly. "I am not a queen, Your Majesty. I know my place, and it isn't here being insulted by a snowflake with a superiority complex." She turned and walked out. Kaelum roared her name, but she didn't stop. She ran back to her room, the illusion of their domestic bliss shattering under the cold weight of politics. Chapter 14. The Library of Souls. Kira didn't go to her room to cry. She went to the library. Ilara was right. Kira had no power. She was a temporary fix for a permanent curse. If she wanted to stay, if she wanted to survive, she needed to be more than just a battery for the king. She needed to cure him. She bypassed the general stacks and went to the restricted section. The iron gate was locked. Kira placed her hand on the lock. Open, she whispered, pushing her hedge magic into the mechanism. It clicked. Weak magic my ass, she muttered, slipping inside. She spent hours scouring the dusty tomes for mentions of void scars. She found it in a book bound in black leather, The Anatomy of Shadows. The void scar is not a wound, it is a mouth. It feeds on the soul of the host. It can be satiated by light magic, but it cannot be filled. It will eventually consume the host entirely. Kira read on, her heart pounding. The only cure is transfer. A soul of equal or greater light must voluntarily accept the void into themselves. The host lives, the vessel dies. There was a footnote in faded ink. In rare cases, ancient alza blood can forcibly bridge two souls to share a burden, but the ritual is forbidden and lost to time. Kira dropped the book. Transfer. That was what she had been doing, transferring small amounts. But to cure him, to truly cure him, she would have to take the whole thing. She would have to die. Interesting reading, a voice hissed from the shadows. Kira spun around. High Priestess Ivara stood there, holding a lantern. The green light made her look like a corpse. You found the truth, Ivara smiled. Good. It saves me the trouble of explaining why you are doomed. You knew, Kira accused, stepping back. You knew the curse would kill him. Of course. That is the point. Ivara stepped closer. But now you know the cure. The question is, little Hedge Witch, do you love him enough to die for him? Or are you just a parasite like Ilaris says?
Chapter 15. The Shadow Trap. Kira backed away, clutching the book to her chest like a shield. I won't let you hurt him, and I definitely won't take advice from someone who looks like they bathe in formaldehyde. I don't need to hurt him, Ivara laughed, a rasping sound. I just need to remove his crutch. Ivara snapped her fingers. The shadows in the library surged. They weren't natural shadows, they were summoned entities. Wraiths. They peeled off the walls, forming distinct shapes with glowing eyes. They circled Kira, cold and hungry. Scream, Ivara commanded. Call him. Let him come and see you die. Kira realized the trap instantly. If Kaelum came here, if he saw her in danger, the beast would take over. He would kill Ivara, and the council would execute him for murdering a high priestess. Or worse, the shadows would feed on his scar and drive him fully mad. No, she whispered. She didn't scream. She ran. She bolted toward the stained-glass window at the end of the aisle. Get her, Ivara shrieked. The wraiths lunged. Cold, spectral claws tore at Kira's dress, scratching her back. She felt the ice seep into her veins, slowing her heart. She reached the window. It was a 3-story drop to the courtyard. I hate heights, she thought wildly. I really, really hate heights. Better a broken leg than a broken king. She grabbed a heavy brass candelabra and swung it, shattering the glass. The cold night air rushed in. Caleb, she screamed, not in fear, but in warning. Don't come. She jumped. She expected to hit the stones. She expected death. She didn't expect to be caught mid-air by a blur of black smoke and fury. Kaelum didn't come through the door, he came through the wall. He caught her, his arms like iron bands, and slammed into the side of the tower, his claws digging into the stone to arrest their fall. They hung there, suspended 50 feet in the air, with the wind howling around them. Kaelum looked at her. His mask was gone. The scar was glowing a violent, blinding violet. His eyes were entirely black. You jumped, he roared, the sound vibrating in her chest. You tried to leave me. It was a trap, Kira sobbed, clinging to his neck. Ivara, she wanted you to see me die. Kaelum looked up at the shattered window where Ivara stood, pale and terrified. He didn't climb up. He dropped. He landed in the courtyard with a crater-cracking boom, shielding Kira with his body. He stood up, holding her close. He looked at the window. Ivara. The name was a curse. The castle shook. You touched her. Kaelum's voice was the sound of the apocalypse. Now, I start the hunt.
Chapter 16. The Siege of Silence. Kaelum didn't chase Ivara. Not yet. Priorities had shifted the moment Kira fell from the window. He marched through the castle corridors, carrying Kira against his chest like she was the only solid thing in a dissolving world. His face was a mask of absolute, terrifying calm, the kind of calm that happens right before a volcano erupts. The guards scrambled out of his way, pressing themselves flat against the cold stone walls. They could smell it, the metallic tang of a king who had snapped. He reached the obsidian suite and kicked the heavy oak door shut behind him, the lock clicking into place with a finality that echoed in the silence. He didn't put Kira down. He walked to the center of the room and simply held her. He was shaking. The scar on his chest was writhing, black tendrils snaking up his neck, pulsing with agitation, but he didn't seem to feel the pain. He only felt her heartbeat against his own. You jumped, he whispered into her hair, his voice broken and rough. Why did you jump? To save you, Kira choked out, her hands gripping the front of his tunic. She wanted to provoke you. She wanted you to kill her so the council would execute you. I figured broken leg was better than a beheaded king. Kaelum pulled back, looking at her with his single, intense blue eye. Let them try. I would burn the world to ash before I let you fall. Do not make calculations with your life, Kira. The math will never work for me. He carried her to the bed and sat her down. He began to check her for injuries, his hands gentle but frantic. He found the scratches on her back from the wraiths, long, shallow marks that radiated a supernatural chill. His eyes went black. Wraith marks. They are cold. They steal warmth from the core. If we don't raise your temperature, your heart will stop. He stripped off his heavy black armor, letting the pieces clatter to the floor. He removed his tunic, then his boots, until he was bare-chested. He climbed into the bed behind her, pulling her back against his massive chest, and wrapping his arms around her waist and tangling their legs together. Take it, he commanded, pressing his hot skin against her freezing back. Take my heat. Steal it back. Kira leaned into him, shivering violently. The warmth was overwhelming, a furnace against her ice-cold skin, but she could feel the scar against her spine. It was pulsing, reacting to the wraith magic in her wounds. Kaelum, the curse, it's feeding on the cold magic. Let it feed, he murmured, burying his face in the crook of his neck. As long as you are warm, I have endured worse than this. You're stubborn, she chattered, her teeth clicking. I am motivated, he corrected. For hours they lay there in the dark. The castle outside was in chaos. Ivara had fled. Alara was spreading rumors of the king's madness. But in the quiet of the room, there was only the two of them, huddled against the cold of the world. Kira felt the exact moment the shivering stopped. She turned in his arms, facing him. The scar on his chest was angry, inflamed from absorbing the wraith chill, but his eyes were clear. You hurt, she whispered, touching the edge of the black mark. I am alive, he said, capturing her hand, because you are here.
Chapter 17. The Council's Ultimatum. Morning brought not light, but a summons. A scroll was nailed to the heavy oak door of the suite with a dagger. It was from the Council of Elders. Kaelum ripped it down. He read it aloud, his voice devoid of emotion. King Kaelum Vossen, you are accused of harboring a dark witch and threatening the high priestess. You have 24 hours to surrender the girl for trial. If you refuse, the council will invoke the right of challenge. You will fight for your crown. Kaelum crumpled the scroll in his fist. It burst into black flames, incinerated by his rage. They want a war, he said, turning to Kira. They think I am weak. They think the curse has finally crippled me enough to be taken down by a few geriatric wolves. Are you? Kira asked softly. She wasn't mocking him. She was watching the scar. It had grown overnight. The black lines now reached his collarbone, spider webbing across his skin like frost. "I am dying," Kaelum admitted, his voice devoid of self-pity. "The curse is accelerating. Every time I use my power to protect you, it eats a little more of me. Yesterday, catching you, it cost me." He walked to her, cupping her face with hands that were surprisingly warm. "But I am strong enough to kill them all before I go, and I will enjoy it." "No," Kira said firmly. She grabbed his wrists, trying to pull his hands away. "If you fight, you use the beast. The beast feeds the scar. You will die before you kill the last one, and then they will kill me anyway. That is a terrible plan." "Then what is the alternative? I give you to them?" Kaelum snarled, his lips pulling back to reveal fangs. "Never. I would rather tear the stars from the sky." "There is another way," Kira said. Her heart was pounding against her ribs. She remembered the book in the library. "Transfer. I can cure you, Kaelum." Kaelum froze. "How?" "Hedge magic is for knitting bones, not sealing voids." "A ritual. Tonight. Under the blood moon." She lied. She didn't tell him the cost. She didn't tell him it required a sacrifice. "I found a spell in the library. It can seal the void permanently. If you are cured, you can fight them without dying. You can win." Kaelum searched her face. He saw fear, but he also saw determination. He didn't see the lie, because he wanted so desperately to believe her. He wanted a future where he wasn't a monster. He wanted a future with her. "Do it," he whispered, leaning his forehead against hers. "Cure me, Kira. Make me whole, so I can make you my queen." "I'll make you whole," she promised, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Just trust me." Chapter 18. The Ritual of Lies. Kira prepared the room. She drew the runes on the floor in salt and iron, her hands steady despite the terror clawing at her gut. She lit the black candles, their flames burning straight and tall in the still air. Kaelum lay in the center of the circle, shirtless, trusting. The scar on his chest looked like a jagged tear in reality, pulsing with hunger. "Does it hurt?" he asked as she painted a symbol on his forehead with ash mixed with lavender oil. "Only for a moment," she promised. "For me," she added silently. "It will hurt me for the rest of my very short life." She straddled his waist. She placed her hands on the scar. This wasn't like before. She wasn't just soothing the pain, she was inviting it in. She was opening the door to her own soul and inviting the monster to change houses. "Come to me," she projected into the void. "I am the vessel. I am fresh meat." She began to pull. Kaelum gasped. His eyes flew open. "Kira, what are you doing? This feels wrong." "Healing you," she gritted out, sweat beading on her forehead. The pain hit her like a physical blow. It felt like acid in her veins. It felt like freezing to death while burning alive. But underneath the pain, she felt something else. Power. Destructive, violet, raw power humming in her blood. The curse wasn't just a drain, it was a weapon, if one could survive holding it. The black tendrils on Kaelum's chest began to detach, slithering up her arms like living ink, seeking her heart. Kaelum saw the black lines moving onto her skin. He saw the color draining from her face. He realized instantly what was happening. "No!" he roared. He tried to sit up, to throw her off, but the ritual paralyzed him. He was locked in place by the salt circle. "You're taking it!" he screamed, struggling against the invisible bonds, his muscles straining. "Stop, Kira, stop! It will kill you!" "It's the only way," she whispered, tears streaming down her face and mixing with the ash on her cheeks. I love you, Kaelum. I won't let you die in the dark. You deserve the sun." She pulled harder. The scar on his chest shrank. The darkness flooded into her. She screamed. It was a sound of pure agony that shattered the glass of the window. Kaelum roared in fury and terror. He summoned every ounce of his alpha strength, breaking his own bones to fight the paralysis. With a sickening crack, he shattered the magical hold. He threw her off him. Kira flew across the room, hitting the wall. She slumped to the floor, gasping. Her arms were covered in black spiderweb veins. Kaelum scrambled to her. He was weakening. "Why?" he sobbed, and gathered her into his arms. "Why would you do that?" "Because you're worth it," she whispered, her eyes fluttering shut. "My king."
Chapter 19. The Silent Betrayal. Kaelum didn't have time to grieve. The door to the obsidian suite burst open. It wasn't the guards. It was worse. Archduke Silas stood there, smiling. Beside him was Ilara, looking smug. And behind them, a dozen soldiers with crossbows aimed directly at Kaelum's chest. "Touching," Silas drawled, clapping slowly. "Truly, the beast and his martyr. I haven't seen a performance this pathetic since the traveling circus left town." Kaelum looked up. His eyes were red with tears and black with rage. He cradled the unconscious Kira against his chest, shielding her with his body. "Silas," he growled, "get out before I paint the walls with you." "I don't think so, nephew." Silas stepped into the room, kicking over a ritual candle. "You are weak. You are distracted. And she," he pointed at Kira, who was shivering violently in Kaelum's arms, "is dying. The curse is in her blood now. I can smell the rot. She has hours, maybe less." Kaelum snarled, tightening his hold on her. "I will save her." "You can't," Ilara said, stepping forward. Her voice was fake sweet, like poisoned honey. "But the High Priestess can. She has a counterspell. She can extract the darkness." "Ivara? She tried to kill her yesterday." "Ivara wants order," Silas shrugged. "She will save the girl if you surrender." "Surrender what?" Kaelum demanded. "The crown," Silas said simply. "Abdicate. Go into exile, give the kingdom to me, and we will heal your little witch. Refuse, and she dies in your arms within the hour." Kaelum looked at Kira. She was shivering, her skin gray, the black veins spreading to her neck. She was suffering. He could feel her life force fading. He looked at his crown, sitting on the mantelpiece. It was no contest. It wasn't even a choice. "Fine," Kaelum whispered. "Take it. Take it all." Silas blinked, surprised by the ease of the victory. "Good boy." He gestured to the guards. "Seize him, and take the girl to the tower. We have leverage to maintain until the paperwork is signed." The guards grabbed Kaelum. He didn't fight. He let them chain him, his eyes never leaving Kira as they dragged her away. "If she dies," Kaelum said softly to Silas, "there is no hole deep enough for you to hide in." He had given up his kingdom, but he hadn't given up the fight. He was just waiting for the right moment to burn it all down. Chapter 20. The Dungeon of the Broken. Kaelum was thrown into the deepest cell of Black Hollow Keep. It was damp, dark, and smelled of despair and rat droppings. He sat in the corner, chained to the wall with heavy silver shackles that burned his skin. He closed his eyes. He reached out with his senses, searching for her. The bond, the fragile, accidental bond that had formed when she first touched his scar, was still there. It was faint, vibrating with pain, but it held. She is alive, he thought. She is fighting. Well, well, a voice came from the bars. It was Ivara. She held a torch, illuminating the misery of his cell. "The Phantom King," she mocked, "reduced to this, a prisoner in his own dungeon?" How the mighty have fallen. Kaelum opened his single eye. It glowed in the dark like a coal. Where is she? You promised to heal her. She is comfortable. Ivara smiled. The curse is consuming her slowly. It is quite fascinating to watch. A Hedge Witch soul burns differently than a royal one. Brighter. Faster. Kaelum lunged at the bars, the chains snapping tight, holding him inches from her face. You promised to save her. I lied, Ivara whispered, her eyes dancing with malice. Did you really think I would let her live? She is the only one who can control you. She dies tonight, Kaelum, and when she does, the backlash will shatter your mind completely. You will be a mindless beast for Silas to use as a weapon. She turned to leave. Enjoy the silence, King. It is the last you will ever hear. Kaelum stood there, panting. The rage was building. The curse on his own chest, half healed, half dormant, flared to life. But this time, he didn't fight it. He didn't try to suppress the monster. You want a beast? He thought, a dark, terrible calm settling over him. I will give you a beast. He looked at the silver shackles. He flexed his wrists, his bones cracked, his muscles swelled, fur sprouted from his skin. He wasn't just a man, he was an alpha. With a roar that shook the dust from the ceiling, Kaelum Vane shifted. The chains shattered, the king was loose, and he was hunting.
Chapter 21. The Beast Unleashed. The dungeon shook. It wasn't an earthquake. It was the sound of a king deciding that rules no longer applied to him. The silver shackles, designed to hold lesser alphas, exploded into shrapnel. Kaelum didn't just break them, he obliterated them. He stood in the center of the cell, fully shifted. He was a nightmare made flesh. A massive wolf of midnight fur, standing 8 feet tall at the shoulder, with eyes of blue fire and a jagged, glowing violet scar running down his chest. The iron door of the cell groaned as he slammed his massive shoulder into it. Crunch! The metal bent like wet paper. He tore it off its hinges with his teeth and stepped into the corridor, his claws clicking ominously on the stone. 2 guards stood there, frozen in terror. Their spears clattered to the floor. The king, one whispered, wetting himself. Run, the other squeaked. Kaelum swiped a paw. He didn't use claws. He wasn't interested in cleaning their blood out of his fur later. The sheer force of the blow sent them flying into the far wall, unconscious before they hit the stone. He didn't kill them. He didn't care about them. He had one scent in his nose, cutting through the damp stench of the dungeon. Vanilla and rot. Kira. And the curse eating her. He bounded up the stairs, a blur of shadow and muscle. He tore through the castle, ignoring the screams of the servants who dropped their trays and the arrows of the panicked garrison that bounced harmlessly off his thick hide. He wasn't fighting a war. He was on a rescue mission, and God help anyone who stood in the hallway. He reached the entrance to the high tower, Ivara's domain. The door was reinforced with iron and layered with warding spells. Kaelum didn't slow down. He roared. The sound shattered every window in the tower and cracked the plaster on the walls. He channeled the curse, the very thing that had hurt him for years, and vomited a beam of violet energy from his maw at the door. The wood disintegrated, the iron melted. He charged in, taking the spiral stairs 3 at a time, his heart hammering a single name. Kira.
Chapter 22. The Altar of Shadow. The room at the top of the tower smelled of ozone, incense, and death. High Priestess Ivara stood at an altar made of polished bone. Kira was strapped to it with leather bindings. She looked terrible. Her skin was translucent, the black veins of the curse pulsing visibly beneath the surface, like a map of agony. Her eyes were open but glassy, staring at the ceiling. Ivara was chanting, drawing the darkness out of Kira, not to cure her, but to bottle it. A crystal vial hovered above Kira's chest, collecting the violet smoke. She was harvesting the weapon. "You're late," Ivara hissed, spinning around as the door debris settled. She didn't look surprised. She looked annoyed. She threw a ball of green witch fire at him. Kaelum didn't dodge. He took the fire to the chest. It singed his fur, smelling of burnt hair, but he didn't slow down. He shifted mid-leap. He landed on Ivara as a man, naked, furious, and terrifying. He grabbed her throat and slammed her into the stone floor, cracking the tiles. "Fix her," he snarled, his voice a guttural wreck that sounded more beast than human. "Put it back, or I will pull your head off." "I can't," Ivara choked, clawing at his hands uselessly. "It's done. The transfer is complete. She is the host now. You can't put toothpaste back in the tube, you fool." Kaelum threw Ivara across the room. She hit the wall with a satisfying thud and slid down, unconscious. He scrambled to the altar, ripping the leather straps as if they were cobwebs. "Kira." He pulled her into his arms. She was freezing cold, vibrating with the foreign energy. "Kaelum," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her eyes focused on him, hazy and dim. "You escaped. And you're naked. Again." "I came for you," he wept, rocking her. "Fight it, Kira. Push it out. Use your sarcasm. Insult it." "I can't," she smiled weakly, blood trickling from her nose. "It's too hungry. It likes me. I taste like poor life choices." Her eyes fluttered shut. Her heart rate slowed to a terrifying crawl. The black veins reached her throat, choking her. She was dying. Kaelum looked at the curse marks on her skin. He looked at the faint, white scar on his own chest where the burden used to be. He made a choice. "No," he growled, brushing the hair from her clammy forehead. "You don't get to be the hero. You don't get to leave me here with these idiots."
Chapter 23. The Soul Bond. He didn't use a spell. He didn't use a potion. He remembered the footnote in the book Kira had found, the ancient law that Ivara had thought lost. Ancient alpha blood can bridge two souls. He used the law of the wolf. He bit his own wrist, tearing the vein open with his canines. Blood welled up, dark and rich, smelling of copper and power. He pressed his wrist to her mouth. "Drink," he commanded, his voice shaking. "Take my blood. Take the bond." Kira turned her head weakly, trying to pull away. "No, Kaelum, it binds us. You'll feel the pain. It's a trap." "I want the pain," he roared, pressing his wrist farther against her lips. "If you die, I die. Drink, damn you. Don't make me force-feed you." The coppery scent of alpha blood woke something primal in her, the survival instinct. Her tongue darted out. She drank. As the blood hit her system, Kaelum leaned down. He bared his teeth. He bit her, right on the mating mark spot, between her neck and shoulder. It wasn't a gentle claim. It wasn't romantic. It was a desperate anchor thrown into a storm. He poured his soul into her. "I claim you," his mind screamed into hers, a voice louder than the curse. "I claim your pain. I claim your darkness. Share it with me." The reaction was explosive. A shockwave of gold light blasted from their joined bodies, shattering the crystal vials on the table. The curse, confused by two souls occupying one space, panicked. It couldn't consume them both. It was diluted. The black veins on Kira's skin receded, flowing back, not into Kaelum, but into the bond between them. The curse didn't disappear, but it spread out, thinning until it was manageable. It became a background hum rather than a scream. Kira gasped, her eyes snapping open. They weren't brown anymore. They were glowing gold, reflecting his own. She inhaled deeply, the color returning to her cheeks as her heart restarted its strong rhythm. "You bonded us," she whispered, touching the bite mark on her neck. "You crazy wolf! You actually did it!" "I saved us," Kaelum rasped, resting his forehead against hers, their breath mingling. "We carry it together now. Half the pain, twice the strength." "You taste like iron and bad decisions," she murmured, leaning into him. "And you," he kissed her bloody mouth, "tastes like life."
Chapter 24. The Reckoning. They didn't have time to celebrate or find Kaelum some pants. The tower shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. "They're here," Kaelum said, standing up and pulling Kira with him. He was naked, covered in blood, and he looked magnificent. "Silas, he brought the army. He thinks I'm dead." Kira looked out the shattered window. The courtyard below was filled with soldiers, hundreds of them. Archduke Silas stood at the front, flanked by Ilara, looking triumphant. "The king is dead," Silas shouted to the troops, his voice amplified by magic. "The witch killed him. Burn the tower. Leave no trace." Kaelum walked to the balcony. He didn't hide his nudity or his rage. He stepped out into the light. "I am not dead," his voice boomed, amplified by his new, bonded strength. It rolled over the army like a physical wave. The army froze. Silence swept the courtyard. "But you will be," Kaelum promised Silas, pointing a blood-stained finger at his uncle. "Kill him!" Silas shrieked, his composure cracking. "Archers, fire! He is a demon!" Arrows flew, a black cloud of death arcing toward the balcony. Kaelum didn't move. Kira stepped in front of him. She raised her hand. She felt the curse humming in the bond, no longer eating her, but waiting to be used. Release, she thought. A wall of violet fire, the energy of the curse, now under her control, erupted from the ground, incinerating the arrows in midair. They turned to ash before they could touch the tower. The soldiers gasped, lowering their bows. "She controls the void!" someone screamed. "She is the queen of shadows!" Kaelum stepped up beside her, wrapping an arm around her waist. He took her hand. The gold light of their bond mixed with the violet fire of her magic, creating a dazzling display of power. "We are the king and queen of Umbra," Kaelum declared. "Kneel or burn." Most of the soldiers dropped their weapons. They knew a power couple when they saw one, and they weren't paid enough to fight gods. But Silas didn't kneel. He grabbed a sword from a guard and charged the tower door, frothing at the mouth. "If I can't rule it, I'll destroy it." Kaelum looked at Kira. "Shall we?" "Let's," she smiled, her eyes fierce. "I've been wanting to punch him for weeks." They jumped. Together, hand in hand, they leapt from the tower. Kaelum shifted midair, a massive wolf catching Kira on his back. They landed in the courtyard with the force of a meteor, cracking the flagstones. Chapter 25. The Phantom Unmasked. The battle was short. It was barely a skirmish. Silas was a politician. Kaelum was a predator. Kaelum tore through the few loyalist guards like paper. He reached Silas, shifting back to human form to look his uncle in the eye. "You wanted the crown," Kaelum said, grabbing Silas by the throat and lifting him off the ground. "Here." He slammed Silas into the stone wall so hard the man's skull cracked. Silas slid down, dead. Kaelum turned. Ilara was trying to sneak away toward the stables, hitching up her expensive skirts. Kira appeared in her path, violet smoke curling around her fingers. "Going somewhere, Lady Ilara?" Ilara trembled, backing away. I was forced. Silas made me. He threatened me." "You called me a nursemaid," Kira said calmly, tilting her head. "You said I had no power. You tried to make me feel small in my own home." She raised her hand. The violet fire flared. "Run," Kira whispered. "Run back to the Frost Pack and tell them the Hedge Witch is queen. And if you ever come back, I will eat your magic and use your diamonds to pave my garden path." Ilara ran. She ran screaming, slipping on the cobblestones in her haste. Silence fell over the courtyard. The soldiers, the servants, the nobles who had crept out to watch. Everyone stared. Kaelum stood in the center of the carnage. He was bleeding from a dozen small wounds, but he didn't care.
He turned to Kira. He reached up and touched his face. The silver mask had fallen off during the fight or the shift. He was exposed. The right side of his face was visible to the world for the first time in years. The scar was there, a silver line now, no longer black, running down his jaw. It wasn't ugly. It was history. It was a map of what he had survived. "They can see me," Kaelum whispered, looking at the crowd. He tensed, waiting for the screams, the revulsion. They see the monster. Kira walked to him. She placed her hand on the scar, cupping his jaw in front of everyone. "They see the king," she said, loud enough for the court to hear. "They see the survivor." She kissed him. It wasn't a private kiss. It was a coronation. It was a claim. The crowd cheered, not out of fear, but out of awe. "Long live the Phantom King," they roared, the sound shaking the walls. "Long live the Witch Queen." Kaelum rested his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. The pain was gone. The silence was gone. The world was loud and bright and full of life. "You didn't stop," he murmured, referencing his threat from so long ago. "If you touch me like that again, I won't stop." "No," she smiled against his lips, "and I never will."
Chapter 26. The New Order. The days following the fall of Archduke Silas were not filled with parties, but with ash, iron, and a staggering amount of paperwork. The Kingdom of Umbra had been rotting from the inside for a decade, poisoned by Ivara's corruption and Silas's greed. Cleaning it out was a messy business, and Kira was currently up to her elbows in it. Kira stood in the center of the Great Hall. It looked different now. The heavy velvet curtains that had blocked the light for years had been torn down and burned in the courtyard. Gray winter sunlight streamed in through the high windows, illuminating dust motes and the nervous, sweating faces of the remaining council members. "The treasury is empty," Lord Vance, a nervous weasel of a man with a mustache that twitched like a rodent's, stammered. He held a ledger as if it might bite him. "Silas drained it to pay the mercenaries. We have no gold for green. The winter will kill the outer packs." Kira snatched the ledger from him. She wasn't a noble. She was a hedge witch who had grown up scrapping for every meal and stretching a copper coin until it screamed. She knew how to survive. "We don't buy grain," Kira said, her voice calm and projecting clearly to the back of the room. "We grow it. The greenhouses in the south, Ivara used them for cultivating nightshade and ego. We burn the poison and plant winter wheat." Lord Vance blinked, horrified. "But, my queen," he hesitated on the title, his eyes darting to the shadows. "That is peasant work. Soldiers do not farm. It is beneath their dignity." "They do if they want to eat," a voice rumbled from the shadows. "Hunger has a way of adjusting one's dignity." Kaelum stepped onto the dais. The council flinched as one entity. Even without the curse driving him mad, he was a terrifying figure. He wore his black armor, but his face was bare. The silver mask was gone, melted down in the smithy the day before. The scar ran down his jaw, a silver line of history that he no longer hid. He moved to stand beside Kira, his hand resting instinctively on the small of her back, staking his claim. "You heard the queen." He growled, his golden eye boring into Vance. "Turn the swords into plowshares until the granaries are full. Any lord who refuses to dirty his hands can answer to me. I'm sure I can find a use for you in the dungeons." He looked down at Kira. The bond between them hummed, a warm, golden thread of shared strength. He could feel her exhaustion, but also her steel. "They are afraid of you," he murmured so only she could hear. "They are afraid of us," she corrected, leaning into his touch and smirking at the trembling lord. "Good. Fear motivates people to plant vegetables." Kaelum smirked. It was a new expression on his face, one that made the female courtiers blush and look away. "I like it when you give orders," he whispered against her ear, his breath hot. "It makes me want to take you back to the tower and remind you who really rules the bedroom." Kira flushed, swatting his arm discreetly.
Behave, Your Majesty. We have a kingdom to save. Try not to threaten anyone with decapitation for at least an hour. The kingdom can wait an hour, he rumbled, his hand sliding lower. I, however, cannot. Chapter 27, The Shared Heart. They didn't make it back to the tower. They made it to the library, the place where she had almost died, and where he had caught her. It seemed fitting. Kaelum locked the heavy oak door. He swept the maps, treaties, and ancient scrolls off the heavy table with one sweep of his arm. He lifted Kira onto the edge, stepping between her legs before the papers even hit the floor. "You are tired," he said, his large hands cupping her face. He wasn't asking. He was feeling it through the bond. "The council drains you. Their petty greed tastes like bile." "It's just noise," Kira sighed, resting her forehead against his. "Everyone wants something. Money, power, validation. It's exhausting being popular." "I only want one thing," Kaelum murmured. He kissed her. It wasn't the desperate, life-saving kiss of the ritual. It was slow, deep, and thorough. It was a kiss of ownership. As their lips met, the bond flared. Kira gasped. She could feel him, not just his body against hers, but his soul. She felt the echo of the void curse, now diluted and harmless, buzzing in the back of his mind like white noise. But mostly, she felt his overwhelming adoration for her. It hit her like a physical wave, a love so intense it bordered on worship. "Do you feel that?" he rasped, pulling back slightly to look into her glowing golden eyes. "Do you feel what you did to me?" "I feel peace," she whispered, "and a significant amount of lust. You should really focus on the budget, Your Majesty." "You are the peace." He ignored her deflection. "And the lust is entirely your fault." He unlaced her bodice with surprising dexterity for a man used to wielding broadswords. His hands were large, scarred, and infinitely gentle. He traced the mating mark he had left on her neck, the scar that matched his own. "Does it hurt?" he asked, his thumb brushing the bite. "No," she said. "It reminds me that I'm not alone. It reminds me that I have a very large, very possessive wolf guarding my back." Kaelum groaned. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling the scent of vanilla and power. "I spent 10 years in the dark, Kira. I thought the pain was my only companion. I thought I would die screaming in that chair." He looked up at her, his blue eyes clear and bright. "You took the scream away. You took the dark. You gave me this." He pulled her closer, pressing his hips against hers. "Do you remember what I told you? That first night, when you stopped the pain?" Kira smiled, wrapping her legs around his waist. "You said if I touched you again, you wouldn't stop." Kaelum ripped her hips. "I lied. I stopped because I had to save you. I stopped because of the war. But now—" He kissed her throat, right over her pulse. "The war is over. The curse is broken. And I have an eternity to show you exactly what I meant. I intend to be very thorough." Kira laughed, a bright sound in the quiet library. "I'm counting on it." Chapter 28, The Crown of Light. 6 months later. The winter had been hard, but the spring was glorious. Black Hollow Keep didn't look like a weapon anymore. Vines of ivy were creeping up the obsidian walls, softening the sharp edges. The courtyard was filled with the noise of training soldiers, laughing children, and the occasional chicken that had escaped the coop. Kira stood on the highest battlement, looking out over the valley. The fields were green with the wheat she had ordered planted. The smoke rising from the village chimneys was white and clean, not the black smog of industry and war. She heard his footsteps before she saw him, heavy, confident, familiar. Kaelum joined her at the railing. He wasn't wearing his armor today. He wore a simple tunic of black wool and a heavy cloak. He looked younger. The lines of pain around his eyes were gone, smoothed away by months of peace and nights of passion. "You are thinking too loud," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. He rested his chin on the top of her head. I can hear your brain whirring from the training grounds. I was just thinking about the carriage. The black box? The one I arrived in. I thought I was coming here to die. I thought I was being fed to a monster. Kaelum tightened his hold. You came here to live. You just didn't know it yet. And the monster turned out to be quite trainable. He turned her around to face him. The wind whipped her hair across her face, and he brushed it away tenderly. The council is petitioning for a formal coronation, he said, making a face. They want to put a crown on you, a big, heavy thing with too many diamonds. They think it will make you look regal. Kira wrinkled her nose. I prefer my hedge crown of dried herbs. It smells better and doesn't give me a headache. Can't we just say I'm allergic to gold? They want to legitimize the line, Kaelum said, his hand sliding down to rest flat on her stomach. His expression shifted from amused to reverent. Kira froze. She looked up at him. You know? I know everything you feel, he smiled, his eyes glowing softly. I felt the second heartbeat this morning. It's faint, like a butterfly wing. But it's there, a little spark of light. Kira covered his hand with hers. Are you afraid? Of a pup? Kaelum laughed, the sound rumbling in his chest. I fought a void demon, Kira. I defeated an army of shadows. I think I can handle a baby. Unless it takes after you, then we are all doomed. His expression sobered. He looked at the scar on his own hand, then at hers. I was afraid of passing on the curse, he admitted quietly, but the bond ate it. This child, it will be born free. It will never know the dark. It will never know the cold. He leaned down and kissed her. It was a kiss of promise, of a future that stretched out before them, bright and endless. I love you, little scribe, even if you are annoying. I love you, my king, she replied, smiling, even if you are dramatic. Kaelum looked out over his kingdom, a land he had once hated, now a home he loved. Let them bring the crown, he said, pulling her close as the sun broke through the clouds. But you don't need gold to be a queen. You already wear the like. The end.